John Doss, have you seen a weirder first half?
Weird. I don't think that weird is the adjective I would use to describe that half.
You give me your adjective to describe that first half.
Awful, atrocious, indicative. That was the worst half of football I think the NFL has seen in 2022. Not even that the Browns have seen in 2022. Those look like the two worst teams in the NFL. And if not for Donovan Peoples-Jones on my FanDuel team.
Look at that.
If not for DPJ, that would have been the worst half of football in the NFL. Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, and there is no excuse because here's the thing. Offensively, I said from the start, I had a feeling that Deshaun Watson was going to look like this, have these moments early. This is the time for him to shake that rust off, right? Offensively, if things don't get going with him throwing the ball, getting involved in the offense right away, you expect that, right? Or at least you should have. That isn't what makes this.
Should have.
That's not what makes that first half so disgusting, right? It's offensive line play. And now granted, obviously Ethan Postic is still out, but they have been just playing god-awful today. Hence 2 points to make that 5 and that safety. No give, no push for Nick Chubb. So offensively on that end, you've got none of that. Anthony Schwartz and that fumble.
With this, let's get to that guy. Let's table this. Let's hit one thing at a time here.
We're going offense. We're going all the offense away from Deshaun Watson.
This team, Chubb and the way the offensive line typically plays, although the second half of this year has not been great, should never get a safety. Ever. Ever. They shouldn't lose yards. They should never get a safety. Okay? That's the one thing. Here's my issue. Okay? Kevin Stefanski knows Deshaun Watson hasn't played football in 700 days, right? He knows that, right?
Yeah.
These coaches, we've been griping about this now for years, going back to Freddie. It's almost like they say, well, everybody thinks we're going to do this, so we're going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes, Camryn, everybody thinks you're going to do that because it's the smart decision to do. The first 2 drives, Nick Chubb is rattling off. He's averaging 8.5 yards per carry on his first 4 carries. So what do? They come out throwing the ball some more with a guy who hasn't played in 700 days.
Yes.
Just take the easy stuff sometimes. For once, take the easy stuff.
I mean, that's the stuff that's unforgivable and gets you in a position where you're
damn right,
up
Robert.
2 points over the Texans. Speaking facts. Listen, well, then you skipped over the fact. It's not even just like throwing the ball. And obviously Deshaun Watson, like Anthony Schwartz being a target there, we know that he's had his issues catching the ball. Anthony Schwartz being a target for Deshaun Watson there makes sense in a way. If you're going to pass the ball, you just hate to pass the ball. That's who he's been throwing to. That's who he's been throwing to. He's been taking a bunch of second team reps since training camp, and Anthony Schwartz has been the guy that he connected with. Right. That does not mean I love that they threw the ball.
Let me ask you this
no
question,
reason
Cam.
to do that.
Who's dropping the ball in practice, too?
Anthony Schwartz.
And I said this morning on Countdown, I said I at least appreciate Kevin Stefanski knows Schwartz is an athlete. Get him the ball however he can. We have learned that is not in the air. Mm-hmm. The ball should never be in the air traveling in Anthony Schwartz's direction.
Especially
never, because that fumble started when the ball was in the air. You saw him catch that ball.
Yep.
And look, I mean, psychologically, I feel bad for the guy too. But, and this is what I tweeted: you can't be angry at the fans for lacking confidence in Anthony Schwartz when Anthony Schwartz lacks confidence in Anthony Schwartz.
And he said that, and the Browns know that, which is.
So why are they throwing him the ball?
Exactly.
Even if he's the 5th option, he shouldn't even be on the field.
No. And I liked how they used him the last time when he scored his touchdown in that opening drive last week. That's how you use him. That's how you start to build the confidence. And if you're not going to give up on him, if you want him to still be that experiment, you got to use him in that way and build the confidence. But this, I feel, just shattered every ounce of confidence they built in him last week. And I feel kind of bad for him in the sense of,
Well, he's
taking
taking up a
shelling
spot on a
himself now.
53-man roster. There's a lot of hardworking guys out there that
There are.
not that he's not hardworking.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other hardworking guys out there
that can produce for you.
That would be able to produce for you. And
Yeah.
I want to see what Tim and Al are saying here about tackling. It's funny. I watched the first half of the road games here at home, and then I go back into the studio, and I'm sitting on the couch with my wife, and she says, "Why can't the Browns ever tackle?" I said, I don't know. Sometimes it looks like they're great tacklers, and today, oh my God, even when they get the guys down for 3 or 4 yard gains, it takes half the defense
to do it,
to get these guys down.
Yeah.
This looks like a team that we've seen on occasion now this year, completely unmotivated. And in most scenarios, I would say, okay, you're playing the worst team in the NFL on the road. You're 4-7. It's hard to get motivated for this game. But given Watson was returning today, I thought that there would be some enthusiasm and some energy. And we have seen none of that.
It looked like it in that opening drive. John Johnson's interception. I thought that might be that, okay, here's that spark. And then it just from there on just fell apart. And it's so strange because Deshaun Watson is a huge motivator for these guys. A lot of these guys, Jadeveon Clowney has said it himself. He was excited to see Deshaun Watson, to get back there, to have him play. And I wonder how much of it is an expectation. We all knew that there was going to be some rust. I wonder how much they expected it to come out and be elite, and are kind of just like, oh, it's going to take some time again. Not an excuse. I wonder how much that plays into it, though. It is an unfortunate thing to sit there and watch that happen and see that lackluster effort. And on special teams, aside from Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Corey Bojorquez had a nice punt, but the coverage, I mean, it's week in and week out. It's the same thing we talk about week in and week out. And I think that's what's so frustrating and what's unexcusable, because Deshaun Watson, no matter how much rust he has right now, he is not going to fix the defense, and he is not going to fix the special teams issues. He cannot single-handedly fix any of that. So even if he comes out here in the second half looking at an elite quarterback, if he flips the switch, or no matter when he does, that still remains an issue that the Browns have not addressed and need to fix. Defensive issues and special teams. It's week in and week out, same thing.
Yeah, they're arguably two of the worst units in football. And the Browns' offense, surprisingly, has been a top 10 offense this season. So when the special teams and defense are that bad, at least the offense in most of the games have kept them competitive. And even the last game against Tampa won them the game. When your offense when your defense and special teams are bad, and your offense look like the offense we just saw in the first half, you are one of the worst teams in football. And that's what it looked like. Now, I agree. I thought there was going to be a lot of rust. Guys that played in 700 days to the day today. That will take time. I did not expect him to look this bad.
You know what? I kind of did.
You expected him to look this
bad?
Is worse than what we saw. Well, this is about what we saw in his one preseason game in Jackson.
Yeah, this is about it. And this is what so during training camp, during practices, there were times where he was in his head. You could tell on those days where he was in his head, something had come up, and that next day he was kind of playing like he was in his head. You would see exactly what we saw here today. Low thrown balls. That accuracy that they praised is not there when he's in his head. And now that atmosphere that everyone was predicting, not so much a big factor, because, I mean, that stadium is pretty empty and it's a lot of Browns fans in there. But it's still something that's in his head. You can't shake that. This is his first game back in almost 2 years. That's a huge thing. And this is his debut as a Cleveland Brown when a team gives you $230 million guaranteed, and you've got a fan base who knows that and is putting all of their stock into you. That's a big mental thing to overcome, and he's been working on that. And I think that's like that. It just reminds me of those training camp practices where he threw balls like this, super low, super off, just not looking like himself. And that's not to say that this is not Deshaun Watson. Like I also have seen him in these practice sessions and as they prepare, throwing absolute dimes. And I do think that will come. But I did expect him to be a little rusty. And I thought, fans might be a little upset at this first game. And it's not surprising to me. It's also not problematic to me, except for the fact that every other phase of the ball is letting them down. And that's where you're going to run the risk of losing this game.
Here's what worries me about what you just said. Let's point out a couple of comments first. Frank Ward leading with his helmet to tackle. Horrible, especially with a history of concussions. Right, Frank? You'd think he'd learn by now,
Yeah.
right? John wants Stefanski to roll Watson out. Let's use that athleticism. Get him out of the pocket. Especially the way that the Browns offensive line is played right now. Watson's been pressured. Let's get him out, move him around, give him some of those other opportunities. Here's what worries me about what you said. When he's in his head, you cannot have a fragile mental state to play quarterback in the NFL. You cannot do it.
I agree.
You really can't do it if you have brought all of this additional stuff and put it on your plate, as Deshaun Watson has done. I'm not getting into any of the allegations, not getting into any of that. If he has that fragile of a mental state that he cannot perform when he is in his head, this ain't going away, Cam. There's going to be boos every time they're on the road. Every time.
Oh, it's going to be worse.
This will follow him his entire career. If he cannot phase that out and play football like he is going to be paid $230 million guaranteed to do, then we got an issue.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest hurdle that I see with him stepping into this role. And I don't think that's something that comes in over Ann. Did you see Ann's comment at the same time as me?
I was waiting for somebody to bring it in. And
he was back in the game.
When he came in on third and short, I said, I got a little teary-eyed. It was a little nostalgic there for the Jacoby Brissett era. I'll say this. And again, with the caveat being that I expected rust, I don't necessarily fault him for playing poorly after not playing for 700 days. To Ann's point, if Jacoby Brissett was playing that first half, I bet it's like 13 or 16 points.
Yeah, I know. I agree.
So
I agree.
Not good. Oh, one last thing, the most frustrating thing, and I didn't expect him to do it right now. Again, hasn't played in 2 years. You pay a guy like that so that with 1:30 on the clock and 3 timeouts, you score before half. You pay a guy that money to go down the field with 1.5 minutes on the clock and 3 timeouts to score. Mahomes does it. Allen does it. Burrow does it. The great quarterbacks in the NFL make you pay for giving them the ball with 1:30 on the clock and 3 timeouts, at the very least a field goal.
Yeah.
Browns went 3 and out with what was very close to a fumble return for a touchdown.
And it probably should. It was very, very close.
It was a fumble. It was a fumble because that ball slipped out of his hands, but by rule it was an incomplete pass and I said, had he fumbled that half a second later or half a second earlier, might have been called a fumble.
It was close.
But he got away with that.
Yeah.
But you gotta put pressure on a defense with 1.5 minutes, 3 timeouts. You got to score before half. And my buddy Nick Padona, I know he likes to always say, you got to double dip. You get the ball in that opportunity, you're getting the ball to start the second half, you got to go put points on the board.
Boom.
They
Absolutely.
didn't. And actually, they haven't put any points on the board.
Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's the only one. That's the only score today.
All right, take us out.
All right.
Put us out of our misery.
That's the first half. It was a very negative first half. Here's to more good things to come. Some rust being shaken off. We'll have to see. Second half starting now. Thanks for watching. There goes John Doss.